Victor Hale grabbed the microphone from the host's hand and pointed straight at Clare Ashford, the woman in the wheelchair at the center table. "Let me be honest with all of you," he said, his voice cutting through the ballroom like a blade. "This company cannot be led by someone who can't even stand on her own 2 feet." 400 people went silent. Clare's knuckles turned white around her armrests. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. But something inside her cracked. And what happened next, when a bartender no one knew set down his tray and walked straight toward her, would change everything. But not the way you think. Not even close. Before we continue, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. And if this story moves you, subscribe and follow this channel. You won't want to miss what comes next. The glass hit the floor first. Clare Ashford heard it shatter somewhere behind her. A champagne flute slipping off a waiter's tray. And for a half second, every nerve in her body fired. That sound. Glass breaking, tires screaming, metal folding like paper. 3 years later, and her body still remembered. She forced her hands flat against her lap and breathed. In. Out. Steady. She was Clare Ashford, CEO of Ashford Capital. She didn't flinch. Not here. Not in front of 400 of Chicago's wealthiest donors. Not in front of the board members seated at the surrounding tables, watching her like hawks circling something wounded. "You all right?" her assistant Diane whispered from behind her wheelchair. "I'm fine." "You're gripping the armrest like you're trying to break it." "I said I'm fine, Diane." Diane didn't push it. She never did. That was why Clare kept her close. Diane knew when to talk and when to disappear. Right now, Clare needed her to disappear. The Meridian Grand Ballroom was full tonight. Every seat taken. Every table covered in white linen and crystal. The Chicago Children's Hospital Gala was Ashford Capital's flagship charity event. Clare's mother, Margaret, had started it 22 years ago, and Clare had taken it over when she took the company. It was supposed to be her night, her event, her room. But it didn't feel like her room anymore. It hadn't felt like her room since the accident. "Clare, darling." She turned her chair slightly. Margaret Ashford approached from the left, immaculate in silver, her posture so perfect it looked architectural. Margaret kissed the air beside Clare's cheek and placed one hand on her shoulder. "You look beautiful," Margaret said. "Thank you, Mother." The Navy was a good choice. Strong, professional. Clare almost smiled. Margaret never just gave a compliment. There was always a strategic analysis attached. "The governor's wife asked about you," Margaret continued. "I told her you'd make time after the keynote. She's interested in the foundation expansion. I'll speak with her." "Good." Margaret paused. Her fingers tightened on Clare's shoulder, just slightly, just enough for Clare to notice. "Victor's here." Clare's jaw set. "I know." "He brought Davidson and Cho. And that new board member, the one from New York, Reynolds." "I know, Mother." "He's planning something." "He's always planning something." Margaret leaned closer. "This is different, Clare. I've heard things. He's been making calls, private calls. He's pushing for a vote." "A vote on what?" Margaret looked at her. And in that look, Clare saw something her mother almost never showed. Fear. "On you," Margaret said quietly. "A vote of no confidence. He wants you out." Clare felt it land in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Not surprise. She'd suspected this for months. Victor Hale had been circling her position since the day she came back to work in the wheelchair. But hearing it confirmed, hearing it from her mother's mouth on the night of her own gala, That was different. When? Claire asked. I don't know. Soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe he's just laying groundwork. But he's talking to people, Claire. He's telling them. I know what he's telling them. Margaret straightened. Then you need to be ready. I am ready. Are you? The question hung between them like smoke. Claire held her mother's gaze until Margaret looked away first. That was rare. Margaret Ashford did not look away from anyone. The fact that she did now told Claire everything she needed to know about how bad things really were. Enjoy the gala, Mother, Claire said. I'll handle Victor. Margaret hesitated, then nodded once and walked away. Claire watched her disappear into the crowd, that silver dress cutting through the black tuxedos like a knife through shadow. Claire turned her chair back toward her table and reached for her water glass. Her hand was steady. Good. She needed steady tonight. Ethan Mercer was running late, and his daughter wouldn't let him forget it. Dad, you said you'd be home by midnight. I will be home by midnight. You said that last time, and it was 1:30. Ethan pressed his phone between his ear and shoulder while adjusting his black vest in the service hallway mirror. He looked tired. He was tired. Double shift. Afternoon at the restaurant, evening here at the Meridian for this charity thing. His feet ached. His back ached. But the gala paid triple the normal rate, and Lily's school tuition didn't pay itself. Lily, I promise. Midnight. Can you promise? He smiled despite himself. She was 9 and already negotiated like a lawyer. She got that from her mother. The thought crossed his mind before he could stop it, and the familiar ache settled in his ribs. Promise, he said. Is Mrs. Chen there? She's watching her show, the one with the doctors. Good. Do your homework? Most of it. Lily. Fine, all of it, except the math worksheet, because fractions are a government conspiracy. Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. God, she was everything. Finish the worksheet. I love you. Love you too, Dad. Midnight. Midnight. He hung up and looked at himself in the mirror one more time. 41 years old. A bartender. Working a charity gala for people who had more money in their watch than he made in the year. 3 years ago, he'd been an architect, had a wife, had a house in Lincoln Park, had a life that made sense. Now he had a 9-year-old, a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, and a pair of black shoes that were starting to crack at the soles. He straightened his vest and walked out to the bar. The ballroom was louder now. Cocktail hour was in full swing, and Ethan fell into the rhythm of it. Vodka soda, whiskey neat, champagne, more champagne. The wealthy drank champagne like it was water. He'd learned that working events like these. He'd also learned that they tipped badly and talked loudly and never looked at the person pouring their drink. Except one woman. He noticed her early in the evening. The woman in the wheelchair at the center table. She was alone most of the time. People came to her, shook her hand, said things that made them smile and made her nod. And then they left. And each time they left, he watched her face change. The polite mask would slip, just for a second, and underneath it he saw something he recognized. Exhaustion. Not the physical kind. The kind that comes from holding yourself together so tightly for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to let go. He knew that face. He'd worn it every day for the first year after Sarah died. Hey, new guy! The other bartender, a stocky kid named Marco, nudged him. Table 12 needs a refill. The old guy in the gray suit. Ethan grabbed a bottle of Macallan and headed out from behind the bar. He wove through the tables, poured for the old guy in the gray suit, who didn't acknowledge him, and started back. His path took him close to the center table. close to her. She was looking at the dance floor. The band had started a slow number, something old, something with strings. Couples were drifting out onto the floor, finding each other, settling into the music. And this woman, Claire, he'd heard someone call her, was watching them with an expression that made Ethan stop. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was hunger. The kind of hunger that comes from being denied something so basic, so human, that you've stopped letting yourself want it. But your eyes betray you. Your eyes always betray you. She wanted to dance. He knew it, the way he knew Lily was lying about the math worksheet. Some things you just see when you've been broken enough to recognize the breaks in others. He turned away and went back to the bar. Victor Hale waited until the room was full. He waited until the cocktails had loosened tongues and the band had created a sense of warmth and celebration. He waited until Claire was isolated at her table, Diane having stepped away to handle a catering issue. Then he moved. He walked to the small stage where the band was set up and said something to the host, a local news anchor named Patricia Wells. Patricia's face tightened, but she handed him the microphone. "Good evening, everyone." The room quieted. Victor Hale commanded attention the way a thunderstorm does, not because people wanted to listen, but because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. He was 63, tall, silver-haired, built like a man who'd never missed a day at the gym or a chance to crush someone beneath him. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he continued. "This gala represents the best of what Ashford Capital stands for: generosity, leadership, and strength. For 22 years, this event has been the crown jewel of our corporate philanthropy." He paused, and his eyes found Claire. "But I think we owe it to ourselves, and to the children this event supports, to be honest about where we are as a company." Claire's stomach dropped. "Let me be honest with all of you," Victor said, and now his voice hardened. He pointed, not subtly, not with the polished indirection of a boardroom politician. He pointed straight at Clare Ashford, the woman in the wheelchair at the center table. "This company cannot be led by someone who can't even stand on her own 2 feet." The silence that followed was total. 400 people, and not one of them breathed. Claire felt the words hit her like physical blows, each one landing, each one calculated. She saw the faces around her, the shock, the discomfort, the few who were nodding along, the many who were looking away because looking at her felt too much like witnessing a car accident. A car accident. There it was again. Always. "I don't say this to be cruel," Victor continued, and his voice shifted into something that was supposed to sound compassionate, but landed like acid. "Claire has been through a tremendous ordeal. We all admire her courage. But courage is not the same as capability. And this company, your investments, your trust, deserves leadership that can stand in any room and command it." He let the word "stand" hang there, let it do its work. Claire's hands were shaking now. She pressed them into her lap, hard, willing them to stop. She could feel the heat rising in her face. She could feel 400 pairs of eyes on her, weighing her, measuring her, deciding if Victor was right. She opened her mouth to speak, to fight back, to say something, anything that would cut through this moment and reclaim her dignity. But nothing came. For 3 years, Clare Ashford had fought. She had fought through the surgeries, fought through the rehabilitation, fought through the board meetings where men twice her age questioned her judgment while pretending to ask about her health. She had fought every single day to prove that she was still Clare Ashford, still the CEO, still the one in charge. And right now, in this moment, with Victor's words still echoing and 400 people staring, she had nothing left to fight with. She felt herself starting to break. She could feel it, the cracks spreading, the walls coming down, the carefully constructed fortress of control and competence beginning to crumble. And then she heard footsteps. Ethan had watched the whole thing from behind the bar. He'd watched Victor take the stage. He'd watched him point at the woman in the wheelchair. He'd heard every word. And something in Ethan Mercer, something that had been sleeping for 3 years, something that had gone quiet when Sarah died and the world stopped making sense, that something woke up. He set down the bottle he was holding. Marco looked at him. "What are you doing?" "Something stupid." "Dude, we're working." "I know." Ethan took off his bar apron. He folded it once and set it on the counter. He straightened his vest. And then he walked out from behind the bar and into the ballroom. He didn't think about what he was doing. Thinking would have stopped him. Thinking would have reminded him that he was a bartender at someone else's party, that these people could buy and sell him 100 times over, that he had no business walking across this floor toward this woman. But Ethan had buried his wife. He had held his daughter while she screamed for her mother. He had learned, in the hardest possible way, that the things worth doing are almost always the things that terrify you. The room was still silent. Victor was still on stage, still holding the microphone, still basking in the aftermath of his attack. No one was moving. No one was speaking. 400 people frozen in the amber of their own discomfort. And through that silence, Ethan walked. He crossed the dance floor. Empty now, no one willing to dance in the wreckage of what Victor had done. And he kept walking until he reached the center table. Claire looked up at him. Her eyes were red. She was fighting the tears, and she was losing. She looked at this stranger, this man in a bartender's vest with tired eyes and cracked shoes, and she didn't understand. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. Not at the wheelchair, not at the CEO title, not at the $100,000 dress or the diamond earrings or any of the armor she wore to protect herself from the world. He looked at the woman underneath all of that, the woman who wanted to dance. He extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" he said. Claire stared at him. "What?" "You heard me." His voice was quiet, steady, not pitying, not performing. Just a man asking a woman to dance. "May I have this dance?" "I can't." She stopped, swallowed. You don't have to do anything," Ethan said. "Just say yes." The room was watching. Victor was watching from the stage, his mouth slightly open, the microphone still in his hand. The board members were watching. Margaret Ashford was watching from somewhere in the crowd, her hand pressed to her mouth. Everyone was watching. And Clare Ashford, the woman who hadn't danced in 3 years, who hadn't been touched with kindness by a stranger in longer than she could remember, who had been sitting in this chair fighting the world alone for so long she'd forgotten there was anything else. Clare Ashford looked at this man's outstretched hand. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Ethan," he said. "Ethan Mercer. And you don't need to know my name to dance with me. You just need to want to." Something broke in Claire's face. But this time, it wasn't the bad kind of breaking. It was the kind that happens when a wall comes down and light gets in. "Yes," she said, her voice cracked. "Yes." Ethan took her hand. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, rough, real. He moved behind her wheelchair and began to push her, slowly, out onto the empty dance floor. Victor's voice cut through the room. "What the hell is this? Who is this man? Security!" touch that microphone one more time, Margaret Ashford's voice rang out from the crowd, sharp as a blade. And I will personally ensure you never sit on another board in this country. Victor went quiet. And on the dance floor, under the chandeliers of the Meridian Grand Ballroom, a bartender and a CEO began to move. Ethan pushed her chair in slow, wide circles. He leaned down and said, "I'm not a great dancer, fair warning." Claire laughed. It came out broken and wet and raw, but it was real. "I'm not either. Not anymore." "Then we'll be terrible together." He turned her chair to the music. The band, reading the room, shifted into something slower, something warm and aching. A cello picked up the melody. A violin followed, and Ethan moved Claire across the floor like she was the only person in the world. She closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 years, Clare Ashford closed her eyes in public and didn't feel afraid. She could feel the music moving through her, not through her legs, not through the parts of her body that had gone silent, but through her chest, her hands, her throat, through the part of her that was still whole, still alive, still hungry for something beyond survival. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just moved her through the music and let her feel it. When the song ended, the ballroom was different. Something had shifted. The silence was no longer Victor's. It belonged to everyone now. It was the silence of 400 people who had just watched something they couldn't quite name, but would never quite forget. Then someone clapped. One person, then another, then 10, then 50, then the whole room, rising to their feet, clapping, some of them crying, all of them looking at the woman in the wheelchair and the man behind her who had done something so simple and so brave it had broken the evening wide open. Claire opened her eyes. She looked up at Ethan. "Why did you do that?" she asked. He thought about it. He thought about Sarah, about Lily, about the years of grief and the slow, painful work of learning to live again, about seeing a woman who needed what he had needed. Not help, not pity, but proof that she was still worth reaching for. "Because someone should have asked you a long time ago," he said. Claire held his gaze, and in her eyes, fierce, broken, burning, he saw something he hadn't expected. Not gratitude, recognition. She saw him too. Victor Hale left the stage without another word. He walked through the crowd, his face carved from stone, and no one stopped him. No one spoke to him. Davidson and Cho were already at the exit, their faces tight. The new board member, Reynolds, was still at his table, his drink untouched, watching Claire with an expression that was hard to read. Margaret intercepted Claire before anyone else could reach her. "Claire, not now, Mother. You need to. I said not now." Margaret stopped. She looked at her daughter, flushed, trembling, alive in a way she hadn't seen in 3 years, and she stepped back. Claire turned to Ethan. He was standing beside her chair, slightly awkward now that the music had stopped and the adrenaline was fading. He looked like a man who had just jumped off a cliff and was only now realizing how high it was. "You're going to get fired," Claire said. "Probably." "You don't seem worried." "I've had worse nights." She studied him. "You've lost someone." It wasn't a question. Ethan met her eyes. "My wife," he said. 2 years ago. Cancer." Claire nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "I'm sorry too, for what that man said to you. It's not the first time. That doesn't make it okay." "No," Claire said quietly. "It doesn't." They looked at each other. Two people who had been broken by different tragedies and rebuilt themselves into different shapes, standing in the middle of a dance floor that still hummed with the echo of what they'd just done. "I have a daughter," Ethan said. "Lily. She's 9. She would have loved watching that. Watching what? A stranger crash a charity gala? Watching someone be brave. Claire's throat tightened. She pressed her lips together and looked away, blinking hard. "Go back to your bar, Ethan Mercer," she said, "before they fire you for real." He smiled. It was a good smile, tired and honest and warm. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and walked back across the dance floor toward the bar. Marco was staring at him with his mouth open. The event coordinator was heading toward them with murder in her eyes. Ethan picked up his apron and started making drinks. Claire sat alone at the center table, the applause still ringing in her ears, Victor's words still burning in her chest, and the warmth of a stranger's hand still lingering on her fingers. She didn't know it yet. She couldn't have known. But her life had just changed forever. The gala ended at 11. The last guests trickled out in clusters, their laughter fading into the Chicago night, and the ballroom staff began folding tablecloths and stacking chairs. The chandeliers dimmed to half light. The band packed their instruments in silence. Claire didn't leave. Diane had tried 3 times to take her to the car. Each time, Claire had shaken her head and said, 5 more minutes. That was 40 minutes ago. Now Diane stood near the exit with Claire's coat draped over her arm, scrolling her phone, knowing better than to ask again. Claire sat at the center table with her hands in her lap, staring at the empty dance floor. She was replaying it. Not Victor's speech. She'd already filed that away in the part of her mind where she kept the things that would fuel her later. She was replaying the dance. The way Ethan's hand had felt on hers. The way the music had moved through her body like something she'd forgotten she owned. The way he'd said, "We'll be terrible together." And she'd laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in so long that the sound of it had startled her. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. "Margaret, call me when you get home. We need to talk about Victor." Claire put the phone face down on the table. "Miss Ashford?" She looked up. A woman in a black event coordinator's blazer was standing beside her table, clipboard in hand, trying very hard to look professional and not exhausted. "We're closing down the ballroom. Can I help you to your vehicle?" "Yes," Claire said. "Thank you." As Diane pushed her toward the exit, Claire turned her head and looked back at the bar. It was empty. The bottles were put away. The glasses were racked. Ethan Mercer was gone. She didn't know why that made her chest hurt. The town car was waiting. Diane helped her transfer from the wheelchair to the back seat. A process Claire had practiced so many times it was nearly automatic now, though it still required a kind of focused effort that left her breathless every time. The chair folded into the trunk. Diane slid in beside her. "Home?" the driver asked. "Home," Claire said. They rode in silence through downtown Chicago, the city lights streaking across the windows like liquid gold. Claire leaned her head against the glass and closed her eyes. "He was just a bartender," Diane said quietly. Claire opened one eye. "What?" "The man. The one who asked you to dance. I checked with the event staff. His name is Ethan Mercer. He's a bartender. Works for a catering company. He has no connection to anyone at the gala. No agenda, no angle." "Why are you telling me this?" Diane hesitated. "Because in 3 years of working for you, I have never seen anyone do what he did tonight. And I want you to know it was real." Claire closed her eye again. "I know it was real." "Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" "Because that's what real feels like, Diane. And I've forgotten how to handle it." Diane didn't say anything after that. She didn't need to. When they reached Claire's apartment, a penthouse on Lakeshore Drive that Margaret had insisted on because it was wheelchair accessible and had views that were appropriate for someone of Claire's position. Diane helped her inside and said goodnight. Claire rolled herself through the dark apartment to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lake Michigan stretched out below her, vast and black and infinite. She pressed her palm to the glass. Her phone buzzed again. Margaret. She ignored it. Instead, she sat at the window for a long time, feeling the ghost of music in her chest and the warmth of a stranger's hand on her fingers. And she thought about what it meant that the bravest thing anyone had done for her in 3 years had come from a man who couldn't afford new shoes. She fell asleep in her wheelchair by the window. She hadn't done that since the first month after the accident, when she was too proud to ask for help getting into bed, and too broken to figure it out alone. When she woke up, the sun was coming through the glass like a blade, and her phone had 17 missed calls. 14 from Margaret, 2 from Diane, and one from a number she didn't recognize. She stared at it for a long time. Then she called Margaret. Her mother picked up before the first ring finished. "Where have you been?" "Sleeping. Victor called an emergency board meeting." Claire's blood went cold. "When?" "This afternoon, 2 o'clock. He's moving fast, Claire. He's using last night as ammunition. He's telling them you're emotionally unstable, that you made a spectacle of yourself at a company event, that I danced? That you danced with a bartender in front of 400 donors and board members while the chairman of the board was making a legitimate case for leadership review." "Legitimate." Claire's voice went flat. "He humiliated me in public, Mother. He attacked my disability in front of every major donor we have. That's not legitimate. That's cruelty." "I know what it was. But the board doesn't care about cruelty, Claire. They care about optics. And right now, Victor is controlling the optics." Claire pressed her hand to her forehead. She could feel the headache forming behind her eyes. The same headache she got before every board meeting, every confrontation, every time she had to prove to a room full of men in suits that she deserved the chair she sat in. Both of them. "What does he have?" Claire asked. "Davidson, Cho, and Whitmore are confirmed votes for Victor. Reynolds is undecided. Peterson and Langley are loyal to you, but they're nervous. If Victor flips Reynolds, he has a majority." "Reynolds, the new one from New York." "He's been on the board for 6 months. He doesn't know you. He only knows what Victor's been telling him." "Then I need to talk to Reynolds before 2 o'clock. "I already tried. He's not taking calls." Claire went silent. She stared at the lake, its surface broken by the wind into a million shards of light. "Claire," Margaret said, and her voice changed, softer now, careful. "There's something else. The unknown number that called you last night." "What about it?" "It was him. The bartender. Ethan Mercer." "How do you know that?" "Because he called me first." Claire pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at it, then brought it back. "He called you? How did he even get your number?" "He asked the event coordinator. Told her he wanted to apologize for disrupting the evening. The coordinator gave him my number instead of yours. Standard protocol." "And? What did he say?" Margaret paused. A long pause. The kind of pause Margaret Ashford used when she was choosing her words with surgical precision. "He said he wasn't sorry for asking you to dance. He said he was only sorry he didn't do it sooner. And then he asked if there was anything he could do to help." Claire's hand tightened on the phone. "Help with what?" "He didn't specify. He just said you looked like someone who'd been fighting alone for too long, and that nobody should have to fight alone." The silence stretched between them. Claire could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "Mother," she said carefully, "what exactly are you suggesting?" I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happened. But since you asked, I looked into him. Ethan Mercer, 41, widowed, one daughter, age 9. Former architect at Brennan and Associates. Left the firm after his wife died. Works as a bartender now. No record. No debts except his daughter's school tuition. He teaches a weekend dance class at a community center on the south side. A dance class? An adaptive dance class for people with disabilities. Claire felt something shift inside her. A plate moving. An earthquake so deep it didn't reach the surface yet, but she knew it was there.
He teaches people in wheelchairs how to dance, Claire said. Among others, yes. And he happened to be bartending at my gala.
Life is occasionally less random than it appears. Claire exhaled. I don't have time for this, Mother. I have a board meeting in 5 hours that could end my career. I know, which is why I think you should call him. Call him? Why? Because when I spoke to him, he said something that stayed with me. He said, the way she looked at that dance floor told me everything I needed to know about her. She's not broken. She's just been convinced she is. And Claire, he's right. Victor has spent 3 years convincing you, convincing the board, convincing everyone. And last night, for 3 minutes on a dance floor, you proved them all wrong. So yes, call him. Not because he can fix anything, but because he saw something in you that you've stopped seeing in yourself. Margaret hung up. She always hung up when she'd made her point. No goodbye, no closing pleasantries. Just the click of a call ended and the weight of her words left behind. Claire sat in the morning light for 10 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called the unknown number. It rang 4 times. She almost hung up. Hello? His voice. Tired, a little raspy. She could hear something in the background. A child's voice, distant, singing something off-key. It's Clare Ashford. A pause. I didn't think you'd call. I almost didn't. But you did. I did. Another pause. The child's voice got louder. The singing turned into a question. Dad, where's my other sock? Check under the couch, Ethan said, his voice muffled, like he'd turned away from the phone. Then he was back. Sorry, morning chaos. You have a daughter. Lily. She's 9 going on 40. Claire found herself smiling. She caught it and stopped. My mother says you teach dance, she said. Adaptive dance. I do. Weekends at the Bridgeport Community Center. It's nothing fancy, just people who want to move. How long have you been doing it? About 1.5 years. I started it after... He stopped. After my wife died. She was a dancer, professional. She always said that dance wasn't about your legs. It was about your intention, about deciding to take up space in the world. Claire's throat tightened. She sounds like she was remarkable. She was. The silence between them was different from the silences Claire was used to. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't loaded with agenda. It was just 2 people breathing on opposite ends of a phone call, each carrying something heavy, each surprised to find the other there. I have a board meeting today, Claire said, at 2 o'clock. There's a man trying to take my company away from me. The man from last night. The one who... Yes. Are you going to fight him? I don't know if I can win. That's not what I asked. Claire closed her eyes. She pressed her free hand against the window, the glass cool against her palm. Below her, the city was waking up. Cars moving, people walking. The whole machine of the world grinding forward, indifferent to the fact. that her life was balanced on a knife's edge. "Yes," she said, "I'm going to fight him." "Good, but that's not why I called." "Why did you call?" She took a breath. "Because last night, when you asked me to dance, I felt something I haven't felt in 3 years." "What?" "Alive." Ethan didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was different, quieter, rougher at the edges. "I know that feeling," he said. "I know what it's like to go so long without feeling it that you forget it exists. And then someone reminds you, and it's like getting hit by a truck." "That's a terrible metaphor to use with someone in a wheelchair." He laughed, sharp, surprised, genuine. "God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "I'm kidding, Ethan." "You're kidding." "I'm kidding."
I do that sometimes. People tend to forget. I won't forget. The child's voice came back, closer now. "Dad, the sock was in the fridge." "Why was it in the fridge?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. I'm 9.
Claire pressed her hand over her mouth, but the laugh escaped anyway. It was small and broken and beautiful. "Your daughter sounds amazing," she said. "She is. She's everything. Ethan, I need to go prepare for this meeting, but I want to ask you something." "Okay." "Your adaptive dance class. Is there room for one more?" The line went quiet. She could hear him breathing. She could hear Lily in the background, still talking about the sock. She could hear the distance between their two worlds. Lakeshore Drive and Bridgeport. Penthouse and 2-bedroom apartment. CEO and bartender. "There's always room," he said. "Saturday?" "Saturday, 10 o'clock. I'll text you the address." "Okay." "Claire?" "Yes?" "Go to that meeting. And when that man tries to tell you what you can't do, you remember what it felt like on that dance floor. You remember that you're still here, that you're still moving, that nobody gets to tell you when your dance is over." She couldn't speak. She pressed the phone against her ear and breathed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Saturday, 10 o'clock. "Saturday." She hung up and sat in the light for a long time. Then she called Diane. "I need my navy suit, the one from last night's gala." "You wore a dress last night." "The navy suit, the one with the sharp shoulders. And call Peterson and Langley. Tell them to meet me at the office at noon. And Diane." "Yes?" "Find out everything you can about James Reynolds, the new board member. Everything. His investments, his philanthropy, his wife's name, his dog's name, what he had for breakfast. I want to know him better than he knows himself before I walk into that room." "Walk?" "You know what I mean." "Yes, Miss Ashford, I do." Claire ended the call and turned her chair toward the bedroom. She had 5 hours. 5 hours to prepare for the fight of her career. 5 hours to figure out how to stop a man who wanted to destroy her from doing exactly that. But something was different now. Something had shifted in the space between last night's dance floor and this morning's phone call. The weight in her chest was still there. The fear, the anger, the exhaustion of being underestimated by people who should have known better. But underneath it, like a heartbeat she'd forgotten how to hear, there was something else. Fight. Not the cold, mechanical fight she'd been running on for 3 years. The kind fueled by obligation and stubbornness, and the refusal to give Victor Hale the satisfaction of watching her quit. This was something warmer, something with blood in it. Something that came from the same place as that laugh on the dance floor, and that broken yes when a stranger asked her to dance. She was done surviving. She wanted to live. And the first step was making sure she still had a company to live for. At noon, Peterson and Langley arrived at Ashford Capital's headquarters. Robert Peterson was 67, a founding board member who'd served under Clare's father. He was loyal, cautious, and terrified of change. James Langley was younger, 52, a finance guy from Boston who joined the board 3 years ago and had been Clare's most consistent ally since the accident. Not because he pitied her, because he'd seen her quarterly numbers. "Close the door," Clare said when they walked into her office. Peterson sat heavily in the leather chair across from her desk. Langley remained standing, his arms crossed. "How bad is it?" Langley asked. "Bad enough that I called you here on a Saturday." Peterson rubbed his face. "Victor's been working this for months. He had dinner with Reynolds twice last week. Twice. I tried to get a meeting, and Reynolds said he was evaluating his position." That's Victor's language. Victor coached him to say that. "What's Reynolds' angle?" Clare asked. "Money," Langley said flatly. "It's always money. Victor's promising him that new leadership will increase shareholder value by 15% within 2 years. He's got projections. They're garbage, but they look good on paper." "And what's Victor's actual plan if he gets me out?" Peterson and Langley exchanged a look. "He wants to sell the philanthropic division," Peterson said. "All of it. The foundation, the gala, the community programs. He calls it trimming the fat. He's been saying privately that the company's charitable work is a vanity project that's costing shareholders." Clare felt her jaw tighten. "My mother built those programs. They've generated more goodwill and more long-term client relationships than any single investment Victor has ever made." "We know that," Langley said. "But Victor's not selling logic. He's selling fear. He's telling the board that the stock is flat, that competitors are outperforming us, and that the reason is me. Your leadership. That's how he phrases it. Your leadership style. Your priorities. He never says the wheelchair out loud. Not in the boardroom. He just lets it sit there." "Until last night," Clare said, "when he said it in front of 400 people. Peterson leaned forward. "That might actually help us, Clare. What he did last night, that was over the line. Even Davidson looked uncomfortable. If we frame this meeting correctly, we can use his own words against him." "How?" "We show that Victor is the liability, not you. A chairman who publicly attacks a CEO's disability at a charity event? That's not just bad optics. That's a lawsuit. That's an HR nightmare. That's every major donor questioning whether they want their name associated with this company." Clare looked at Langley. "Can you pull the donor responses from last night?" "Already did." Langley pulled out his phone. "I've had 11 calls this morning from major donors. 8 of them were calling to say they were appalled by Victor. 3 of them were calling to increase their pledges." "Increase?" "Because of you. Because of what you did on that dance floor. One of them, Margaret Chen, the tech investor, she said, and I quote, 'Clare Ashford showed more leadership in one dance than Victor Hale has shown in 10 years on the board.'" Clare let that land. She let it settle into the place where Victor's words have left bruises. "And Reynolds?" she asked. Langley shook his head. "Still dark. Won't take calls." "He'll be at the meeting?" "He has to be. Victor called it. All board members are required." Clare nodded slowly. She turned her chair toward the window. The Chicago skyline spread out before her. Steel and glass and ambition. The city that had built her family's fortune. The city that had broken her body on a rain-slick highway 3 years ago. "I need 10 minutes alone with Reynolds before the meeting starts," she said. "He won't agree to that," Peterson said. "He will, if we give him something he wants more than Victor's promises. Like what? Claire turned back to face them. Diane is pulling his profile right now. Everyone wants something, Robert. Everyone. Victor knows that. That's why he's winning. He figured out what Davidson and Cho and Whitmore wanted, and he gave it to them. We need to do the same thing with Reynolds. Except we need to do it honestly. Honestly, Peterson repeated, like he was tasting the word and finding it strange. Yes, honestly. That's the difference between Victor and me. He buys people. I convince them. And I'm going to convince James Reynolds that this company is better with me in this chair than with anyone Victor puts in my place. Langley uncrossed his arms. What do you need from us? Cover. When Victor starts the meeting, I need you to push for a 48-hour delay on any vote. Parliamentary procedure. Say you need time to review the motion. Buy me 2 days. And if he won't delay? He'll delay. Because you're going to tell him that if he forces a vote today, you'll go public with what he said last night. Every word. Audio, video, donor testimonials. You'll burn his reputation to the ground. Peterson went pale. That's a threat. It's a negotiation. There's a difference. Claire looked at him, steady. Robert, you've been on this board for 22 years. You served with my father. You watched me grow up. You watched me take this company and double its value in 5 years. You watched me break my spine and come back to work 4 months later. So I'm asking you, not as your CEO, but as Edward Ashford's daughter, do you believe I can lead this company? Peterson's eyes reddened. He pressed his lips together and nodded. Then help me. He nodded again, harder this time. I'll get you the delay. And I'll handle Reynolds, Langley said. I know his wife. She's on the board of the Chicago Arts Council. If Claire's foundation work impressed Margaret Chen, it'll impress Eleanor Reynolds too. Claire looked at both of them. These two men, imperfect, nervous, so different from each other, who had chosen to stand with her when it would have been easier and safer to step aside. Thank you, she said. Both of you. Peterson stood, buttoning his jacket. Your father would be proud of you, Claire. Not because you're fighting, because of how you're fighting. He walked out. Langley followed, already on his phone. Claire sat alone in her office. The clock on the wall read 12:47, 1 hour and 13 minutes, until the meeting that could end everything she'd built. She pulled out her phone. She scrolled to Ethan's number. She didn't call. She just looked at it. Then she opened her text messages and typed 3 words. Wish me luck. The response came 30 seconds later. You don't need luck. You need them to see what I saw. She stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then she put the phone away, straightened her shoulders, and rolled toward the boardroom. The fight was here, and Clare Ashford was done waiting for permission to win it. The boardroom was already full when Claire rolled through the door at 1:58. She felt them before she saw them. The energy in the room hit her like a wall, tight, charged, dangerous. 9 board members seated around the long mahogany table, each one carrying the weight of a decision they hadn't made yet. Coffee cups untouched, phones face down, eyes tracking her as she moved to the head of the table. Victor Hale sat at the opposite end. He didn't stand when she entered. He didn't greet her. He just watched, the way a man watches a chess piece he's already decided how to take. Davidson was to Victor's left, mid-50s, slick, the kind of man who agreed with whoever was winning. Cho sat beside him, arms folded, expression blank. Whitmore, the oldest board member at 71, kept his eyes on the table like he was trying to disappear into the wood grain. These 3 were victors. Clare had known that for months. Peterson and Langley were on Clare's side of the table. Peterson gave her a small nod. Langley didn't look up. He was typing something on his phone, his jaw tight. And then there was Reynolds. James Reynolds sat in the middle of the table. Neutral ground. He was 55, clean-shaven, wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of quiet that made you nervous because you couldn't tell what was behind it. He'd been on the board for 6 months and had voted with the majority on every issue. A follower. Or so Clare had assumed. Diane had delivered the file on Reynolds at 12:30. Clare had memorized it in 20 minutes. James Reynolds, Harvard MBA, 20 years at Goldman before going independent. Wife, Eleanor, patron of the Chicago Arts Council. One son, grown, living in Seattle. Reynolds' personal portfolio was heavy in sustainable investing. He donated to 3 disability rights organizations in the past 2 years. His son had cerebral palsy. That last fact had stopped Clare cold. Victor cleared his throat. Now that everyone's here, let's begin. Before we begin, Peterson said, his voice carrying the rehearsed steadiness Clare had coached him on, I'd like to raise a procedural point. Victor's eyes narrowed. What point? Any motion of no confidence requires a 48-hour review period before a formal vote. Board Bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4. The motion was filed this morning. The earliest we can vote is Monday. That's a technicality, Robert. It's a bylaw, Victor. This board runs on bylaws, unless you're suggesting we abandon them when they're inconvenient for you. The room shifted. Davidson leaned back in his chair. Cho uncrossed his arms and looked at Victor, waiting. Victor smiled. It was the kind of smile that made Clare think of predators. Patient, certain, unhurried. Fine. We won't vote today, but we will discuss the motion. I assume no one objects to a discussion? He looked around the table. No one objected. Good. Victor stood. He always stood when he wanted to control a room. It was deliberate. Clare knew that now. He stood because she couldn't. Every time he rose to his full height in a boardroom, it was a reminder, a weapon disguised as posture. Let me be direct, Victor said. Ashford Capital's stock has been flat for 18 months. Our competitors, Meridian, Hale, and Worth, Blackstone, have all outperformed us. Our charitable expenditures have increased by 22%, while our revenue growth has stalled at 3%. These are not opinions. These are numbers. He placed a printed report on the table and slid it toward the center. Davidson picked it up and passed it along. I'm not here to attack anyone personally, Victor continued, and Clare nearly laughed at the audacity of that statement. I'm here because I have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders of this company, and I believe, sincerely, that we need new leadership to move forward. He sat down. The performance was over. Now came the politics. Whitmore spoke first. The numbers are concerning. I've been saying that for 2 quarters. The numbers are cyclical, Langley shot back. Every investment firm in our sector saw a dip in the same period. We're performing in line with the market. Victor's comparisons are cherry-picked. They're not cherry-picked, Davidson said smoothly. Meridian is up 11%. We're up 3%. Meridian took on high-risk derivative positions that happened to pay off in a bull quarter, Langley said. That's not strategy. That's gambling. If the market had gone the other way, they'd be in a congressional hearing. But it didn't go the other way, Cho said quietly. It went their way. And our shareholders are asking why it didn't go ours. Clare listened. She let them talk. She let the arguments build and the tensions rise, and the temperature in the room climb degree by degree. She'd learned this from her father. Edward Ashford had always said that the person who speaks last in a boardroom speaks loudest, as long as they have something worth saying. Victor turned to her. "Claire, you've been quiet. Would you like to respond?" "I would." She didn't move to the center of the table. She didn't raise her voice. She stayed exactly where she was and spoke with the same measured clarity she'd used to close a $900 million deal 2 years ago from a hospital bed. "Victor is right about the numbers," she said. The room went still. Peterson shot her a look. Langley's typing stopped. "Our growth is at 3%, Claire continued. "That's a fact. And I'm not going to stand here and—" She paused. Let the word breathe. "I'm not going to sit here and pretend that 3% is where we want to be. It's not. I know that. You know that. The shareholders know that." Victor leaned forward slightly, surprised. He'd expected her to fight the numbers. He hadn't expected her to own them. "But here's what Victor's report doesn't include," Claire said. "It doesn't include the 14 new institutional clients we've onboarded in the last 12 months. It doesn't include the expansion of our fixed income division, which is up 19% and is now the fastest growing segment in our portfolio. It doesn't include the fact that our client retention rate is 97%, the highest in the industry. And it doesn't include the reason for that retention." She looked around the table. Every eye was on her. "Trust," she said. "Our clients trust us. They trust us because we don't gamble with their money the way Meridian does. They trust us because we've built relationships, not just portfolios. They trust us because, when the market went sideways, we called every single major client personally and walked them through our strategy. I made 47 of those calls myself, from this chair, and not one of those clients pulled their money." She let that sit. "Victor's right that we need growth. I agree. And I have a plan for that growth. A plan I was going to present at next month's quarterly meeting, before this emergency session was called. A plan that involves expanding our international division, targeting emerging markets in Southeast Asia, and launching a new sustainable investment fund that aligns with where the market is heading." She turned to Reynolds. He was watching her with those quiet eyes, his face giving nothing away. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, "you've been on this board for 6 months. I realize we haven't had the chance to speak at length, and that's my failure. So let me ask you directly. What do you need from me to feel confident in the direction of this company?" The room held its breath. Reynolds took off his glasses and cleaned them with his tie, a gesture that was either thoughtful or a stalling tactic. When he put them back on, he looked at Claire. "I need to understand something," he said. "Last night at the gala, what happened?" "What specifically?" "You danced with a bartender in front of the entire donor base, while the chairman of the board was addressing the room. I'd like to understand what that was." Victor leaned back, a trace of satisfaction crossing his face. Claire didn't flinch. "What it was," she said, "was a response." "To what?" "To being told, publicly, in front of 400 people who trust me with their money and their philanthropic vision, that I am not capable of leading because of a wheelchair." Victor didn't raise a business concern last night, Mr. Reynolds. He made a personal attack on my disability. And when no one in that room stepped forward to challenge it, a man I'd never met, a bartender, yes, had the courage to do what no one else would. And what was that? He treated me like a human being. Reynolds held her gaze. The room was so quiet, Claire could hear the air conditioning cycling through the vents. "Victor," Reynolds said, turning slowly. "Is that accurate? Did you reference Ms. Ashford's disability in your remarks?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I made an observation about the demands of leadership. I didn't—" "You said," Claire interrupted, and her voice was steel now,
that this company cannot be led by someone who can't stand on her own 2 feet. Those were your exact words. 400 witnesses. I'm certain at least a dozen of them recorded it on their phones. The room erupted, not in shouting, but in the quiet, devastating kind of eruption where everyone shifts in their seats and avoids eye contact, and realizes that the ground beneath them just moved. Davidson spoke first. "Victor, is that true?" It was taken out of context. "What context?" Langley asked, his voice sharp. "In what context is it acceptable for a chairman to publicly mock a CEO's physical disability at a charity event? I'd love to hear it." "I was making a point about perception. You were making a point about power," Clare said. "Your power. And you used my body to do it. That's not leadership, Victor. That's bullying. And if you think this board can't tell the difference, you've underestimated every person in this room." Cho unfolded his arms. He looked at Victor, then at Clare, and then at the table. "I'd like to hear the growth plan," he said. Davidson turned to him sharply. "What?" "The growth plan. The one Clare mentioned. International expansion? Sustainable fund? I'd like to see the numbers." "We're here to discuss leadership, not—" "We're here to discuss what's best for this company," Cho said. "And right now, I'm hearing 2 very different visions. I want to see both of them backed up with data before I decide anything." Clare seized the opening. "I can have the full proposal on every board member's desk by Monday morning, complete with projections, market analysis, and a 3-year timeline. All I'm asking for is the chance to present it before any vote takes place." "That seems reasonable," Reynolds said. Victor's hands were flat on the table. Clare could see the tension in his fingers, the tendons standing out like cables. He was losing control of the room, and he knew it. "This isn't about a growth plan," Victor said, and his voice dropped lower, the way it always did when he was at his most dangerous. "This is about whether this company has the leadership it needs to survive the next 5 years. And I'm sorry, but that question doesn't go away because of a nice speech." "You're right," Clare said. "It doesn't. It goes away because of results. And I'm asking this board to give me until Monday to show you what results look like." She looked at each board member in turn. Peterson, Langley, Cho, Davidson, Whitmore, Reynolds. She met every pair of eyes and held them, one by one, and in each one she placed the same unspoken message. "I am still here. I am still fighting. And I am not going away." "All in favor of tabling the vote until after Clare presents her proposal on Monday?" Peterson said. 5 hands went up. Peterson, Langley, Cho, Reynolds, and, to everyone's surprise, Whitmore. Victor stared at Whitmore. "Frank?" Whitmore shrugged, his old eyes tired. "I want to see the plan, Victor. That's not disloyalty. That's due diligence." The vote was tabled. The meeting was over. Victor stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out without a word. Davidson followed. Cho lingered for a moment, gathering his things slowly, and as he passed Clare, he paused. "That thing you said about trust," he said quietly. "You're right. I just needed to hear you say it." He left. Peterson exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour, and squeezed Clare's shoulder on his way out. Langley gave her a look that said everything. Relief, pride, warning, all at once, and followed. Reynolds was the last to leave. He stood at the door with his briefcase in one hand and his glasses in the other. He turned back to Clare. "Ms. Ashford, Mr. Reynolds? My son has cerebral palsy. He's 26 now, works in tech in Seattle. He's the smartest person I've ever met." Reynolds put his glasses on. "Victor never mentioned your growth numbers. He never mentioned client retention. He only ever talked about the chair.
That told me everything I needed to know about him. But I needed to hear you talk about the numbers to know everything I needed to know about you. And now? Now I know. He walked out. Claire sat alone in the empty boardroom. The reports and coffee cups and water glasses were still scattered across the table. The chair at Victor's end was pushed back at an angle, abandoned in haste. She gripped the edge of the table with both hands and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere she hadn't accessed in years. It wasn't relief. Not yet. She'd bought herself 2 days, not a victory. But for the first time since the accident, she'd fought back on her own terms. Not with anger, not with desperation, with the truth. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, how'd it go? She stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still burning through her. She typed back, I didn't win, but I didn't lose. His reply came fast. Sometimes that's the hardest thing, staying in the fight when nobody expected you to show up. She read it twice, 3 times. I need that growth plan finished by Sunday night. I'm going to be working all weekend. So, no dance class Saturday? She hesitated. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. The rational part of her brain, the part that had built a company and survived a broken spine and stared down Victor Hale in a boardroom. That part said cancel. Work through the weekend. Lock yourself in the office and build the most airtight presentation the board has ever seen. Don't waste time on a dance class at a community center in Bridgeport with a bartender you barely know. But there was another part of her now, a part that had woken up on a dance floor 2 nights ago. A part that remembered what Ethan had said on the phone that morning. Nobody gets to tell you when your dance is over. She typed, what time again? 10 o'clock. I'll be there. She put the phone down and called Diane. I need you to clear my Saturday morning, 10 to noon. You're supposed to be working on the proposal all weekend. I know. Clear it anyway. May I ask why? No. Claire, Diane, Saturday morning. Clear it. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then, should I have a car ready at 9:30? Yes. Destination? Bridgeport Community Center. Another pause, longer this time. Is this about the bartender? It's about me. Diane let the silence speak for both of them. 9:30. I'll have the car ready. Claire ended the call and turned her chair to the window. The afternoon sun was dropping over Chicago, painting the skyline in shades of amber and gold. She pressed her hand to the glass, a habit she'd developed since the accident. This need to touch the world through barriers, to feel its warmth even when something stood between them. She had 48 hours to save her company. She had a board that was split down the middle and a chairman who would use every one of those hours to pull it further apart. She had a growth plan that existed in pieces, scattered across spreadsheets and strategy memos, and the notes she kept on her phone at 3 in the morning when sleep wouldn't come. She needed to pull it all together. She needed it to be perfect. She needed it to be undeniable. But first, she needed to do something she hadn't done in 3 years. She needed to breathe. She closed her eyes and for just a moment, she let herself feel it all. The exhaustion, the fear, the anger at Victor that burned so hot it could have melted the glass under her palm. The strange, terrifying warmth that had entered her life 48 hours ago, in the form of a bartender with tired eyes and cracked shoes, who had walked across a dance floor like he was walking into a fire. She opened her eyes. Okay, she said to the empty room. Okay. She pulled her laptop from the bag hanging on the back of her chair, opened it, and began to work. The numbers were there. She knew they were there, buried under months of defensiveness and survival mode. She'd been so busy protecting her position that she'd stopped building on it. Victor had backed her into a corner, and she'd been fighting from that corner for so long, she'd forgotten she could move. Not anymore.
She started with the international expansion. 3 target markets she'd been researching for the past year, quietly, without telling the board, because she hadn't trusted that the information wouldn't get back to Victor.
Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Europe. Each one represented a massive, untapped client base for the kind of conservative, trust-based investment management that Ashford Capital did better than anyone else in the industry. She pulled the projections. She ran the numbers. She cross-referenced them against market data from the last 4 quarters. The story they told was exactly the one she needed. Growth potential of 12 to 15% over 3 years, with a risk profile that would make even the most cautious board member comfortable. Then the Sustainable Investment Fund. This was the piece she was most excited about. The piece she'd been building in her mind since before the accident.
A fund built entirely around ESG principles, environmental, social, governance, targeting the massive wave of millennial and Gen Z wealth that was beginning to flow into the market. The data was overwhelming. The demand was there. The competition was thin, and Ashford Capital was positioned perfectly to lead. She worked through the afternoon. She worked through dinner. Diane brought her a sandwich that sat untouched on the desk until it went stale. She worked until the cleaning crew came and went, until the office lights dimmed to their overnight settings, until the only light in the building was the glow of her laptop screen reflected in the dark windows. At midnight, her phone rang. "You're still at the office," Margaret said. "How do you know that?" "I drove past the building. Your floor is the only one lit up." "You drove past the building at midnight?" "I couldn't sleep." "What's the proposal looking like?" Claire leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes. "It's good, Mother. It's really good. The international numbers are strong. The sustainable fund analysis is compelling. If I can present this clearly on Monday, I think I can hold Reynolds and maybe flip Cho permanently." "And if you can't?" "Then Victor wins, and the first thing he does is gut the foundation." Margaret was quiet for a long time. "Your father started that foundation the year you were born. Did you know that? He said he wanted to build something that would outlast him, something that would matter after the money stopped mattering." "I know, Mother." "He would have loved what you did on that dance floor, Claire. He would have stood up and cheered." Claire's eyes burned. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose and breathed. "I'm going to save this company, and I'm going to save the foundation. I just need these 2 days." "Then use them. And Claire?" "Yes?" "Get some sleep. You can't fight Victor running on adrenaline and stubbornness."
"You just described my entire management style." Margaret laughed, a rare, warm sound that Claire held onto like a lifeline. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Mother." Claire hung up. She saved her work, closed the laptop, and sat in the dark office. The city hummed outside the windows. Somewhere out there, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport, a bartender was probably lying awake too, wondering if the woman he'd asked to dance would actually show up on Saturday. She would. She didn't know yet what that would mean. She didn't know that walking through the doors of the Bridgeport Community Center would crack her open in ways the accident never had. She didn't know that watching Ethan Mercer move through a room full of people in wheelchairs and on crutches and in braces, moving with them, laughing with them, treating them not as patients or charity cases, but as dancers, would undo something fundamental in the way she saw herself. She didn't know any of that yet. All she knew, sitting in the dark at midnight, with the weight of 2 empires on her shoulders, the company and the foundation, the business and the heart, was that she was tired of being strong in the way the world expected. She wanted to be strong in the way that mattered. She wanted to be strong enough to be soft. She gathered her things, called the car, and went home. The city lights blurred past the window as the town car crossed Michigan Avenue and turned north on Lakeshore Drive. Lake Michigan was black and endless to her right, and the skyline blazed to her left. And somewhere between the two, Clare Ashford made a decision she couldn't have articulated if anyone had asked. She decided to stop holding her breath. She decided to let whatever was coming, the board vote, the dance class, the bartender with the sad eyes and the brave hands, she decided to let it come. And when she got home and transferred herself from the car to the wheelchair to the bed, she lay in the dark and did something she hadn't done since the night of the accident. She cried. Not from sadness, not from fear, not from the grinding, suffocating loneliness of being a woman in a wheelchair in a world built for people who could stand. She cried because for the first time in 3 years, she felt something breaking open inside her that wasn't pain. It was hope. And hope, she was discovering, was the most terrifying thing of all. Because hope meant you had something to lose again. Hope meant the armor had cracks. Hope meant that a stranger's hand and a slow song and the words, "May I have this dance," could reach into the locked vault of your chest and touch the thing you'd been protecting so fiercely you'd forgotten it was there. Her heart. Still beating. Still wanting. Still alive. She wiped her face on the pillow and stared at the ceiling until sleep came. When it did, she dreamed of music. Not the grand orchestral sweep of the gala band, but something simpler. A guitar. A slow rhythm. The sound of feet and wheels moving across a wooden floor. And a voice, quiet and steady, saying, "You don't have to do anything. Just say yes." In her sleep, Clare smiled. It was the first time she'd smiled in her sleep since the accident. And somewhere across the city, in a narrow bedroom with crayon drawings taped to the walls, Ethan Mercer sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the framed photo on the nightstand. Sarah. Laughing, hair wild, mid-spin in the dance studio where they'd met 12 years ago. "I met someone," he said to the photo. "Not like that. Not yet. I don't know what it is. But she needed someone to see her, Sarah. The way you always saw me." He touched the frame. "I think you would have liked her." He turned off the light and lay back. In the next room, Lily murmured something in her sleep. Something about socks and fractions and a conspiracy. And Ethan smiled in the dark, the way Clare was smiling across the city. Two broken people, unknowingly synchronized by the same fragile, terrifying, unshakable thing. Saturday was coming, and nothing would be the same after. Saturday morning came too fast. Clare had worked until 3 a.m. on the proposal, slept 4 hours, and woke up with her laptop still open on the bed beside her. The sustainable fund projections were solid. The international expansion numbers were airtight. She'd emailed the draft to Langley at 2 a.m., and he'd responded at 2:15 with one word. Strong. But strong wasn't enough. It needed to be undeniable. It needed to be the kind of presentation that made Reynolds forget everything Victor had whispered in his ear over expensive dinners. She could keep working. She should keep working. The car was coming at 9:30 for Bridgeport, and every rational instinct in her body was screaming to cancel. Call Ethan. Tell him something came up. Stay at the desk. Finish the projections. Save the company. Her phone buzzed at 9. Ethan. Lily wants to know if you like chocolate chip or blueberry pancakes. She's making them for the class. Clare stared at the message. A 9-year-old girl she'd never met, was making her pancakes. She typed back, "Chocolate chip." Then she closed the laptop, called Diane, and got ready. The car pulled up to the Bridgeport Community Center at 9:52. Claire sat in the back seat and looked at the building through the window. It was old. Brick, single story, a faded mural on the side wall that she couldn't quite make out. Nothing like the buildings she spent her days in. Nothing like the glass towers of downtown or the marble lobbies of Lakeshore Drive. "Do you want me to wait?" the driver asked. "Yes, 2 hours." "And if it's longer?" Claire hesitated. "Wait anyway." She transferred to her wheelchair and pushed herself up the concrete ramp to the front entrance. The door was propped open with a folding chair. She could hear music inside. Not the polished strings of the gala, but something warmer. Acoustic guitar. A woman's voice singing something slow and sweet. Claire stopped at the threshold. Her hands gripped the wheels. She couldn't move. It was such a small thing, rolling through a doorway. She did it 50 times a day. But this doorway felt different. This doorway felt like a line. On one side was the Clare Ashford the world knew, the CEO, the fighter, the woman who had turned her wheelchair into a throne and dared anyone to feel sorry for her. On the other side was something she couldn't name, something that terrified her more than Victor Hale and the entire board of directors combined. "You made it." She looked up. Ethan was standing in the doorway. He was wearing jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, and his hair was slightly damp, and he looked nothing like the bartender from the gala. He looked like himself, whatever that was. Claire was still figuring it out. "I'm early," she said. "You're right on time. Come in." He stepped aside. She rolled through the door and into the room. There were 12 people inside, some in wheelchairs, 2 on crutches, one woman with a prosthetic leg sitting on a folding chair, retying her sneaker. A teenage boy with no arms was laughing at something an older man had said. A young woman in an electric wheelchair was spinning herself in slow circles near the speaker, her eyes closed, lost in the music. And in the center of it all, standing on a step stool behind a folding table covered in paper plates, was a girl with wild brown curls and her father's eyes. "Dad!" she called out. "Is that her? Is that the lady?" "Lily," Ethan said, a warning in his voice that held no actual warning. "What did we talk about? You said, 'Don't make a big deal.'" Lily jumped off the step stool and walked straight up to Claire's wheelchair. She looked at Claire with the unflinching directness that only children and very old people possess. "Hi, I'm Lily. I made you pancakes. The chocolate chip ones are on the left. Don't eat the ones on the right. Those are Tommy's, and he'll cry." Claire looked at this child, 9 years old, fearless, her mother's absence written in the careful way she'd set the table and the proud way she presented her work, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Thank you, Lily," she said. "They look perfect. They're a little burned on the bottom, but Dad says that adds character." "Your dad is right." Lily beamed. Then she leaned in close and whispered, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Are you really a CEO?" "I am." "What's that mean?" "It means I'm the boss." Lily's eyes went wide. "Of what?" "Of a company. A big one." Lily looked at Ethan. "Dad, she's the boss of a big company." "I know, sweetheart. Can she boss you around?" "She already does." Claire laughed. It came out before she could stop it. A real laugh, full and open, the kind that made the people near her turn and look. The woman with the prosthetic leg smiled. The teenage boy without arms grinned. The older man nodded approvingly, as if Claire had just passed a test she didn't know she was taking. Ethan pulled up a folding chair and sat beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous." About the class? About everything. He nodded. That's normal. Everyone's nervous the first time. Just remember, there's no wrong way to do this. We're not performing. We're not competing. We're just moving. What if I can't? You can. You don't know that. I know that because I watched you move across a dance floor 2 nights ago with 400 people staring at you, and you didn't stop. You didn't quit. You closed your eyes, and you let the music in. That's all this is, Claire. That's the whole thing. She looked at him, this man who spoke to her without armor, without agenda, without the careful political calculus that colored every interaction in her professional life. He talked to her the way the weather moves, directly, honestly, without apology. Okay, she said. Show me. Ethan stood and walked to the center of the room. He didn't clap his hands or blow a whistle or do any of the things Claire expected from someone running a class. He just turned down the music slightly and said, Hey everybody, we've got someone new today. This is Claire. 12 faces turned to her. 12 people who knew intimately what it meant to move through the world in a body that the world hadn't been built for. They didn't stare at her wheelchair. They didn't offer sympathy. They just nodded, waved. The teenage boy said, Welcome to the chaos. All right, Ethan said. Let's start where we always start. Close your eyes. Find your breath. And when the music starts, move whatever wants to move. Hands, arms, head, shoulders. Whatever part of you is listening, let it answer. He turned the music up. The acoustic guitar returned, joined now by a piano, soft and steady. Claire closed her eyes. Nothing happened at first. She sat in her chair with her eyes shut and felt ridiculous. She could hear the others moving, the creak of wheelchair springs, the soft thud of the crutches finding rhythm, the whisper of clothing shifting. But her body stayed locked, frozen, the same way it froze every morning when she transferred from bed to chair and felt the absence of sensation below her waist, like a hole in the center of herself. Then Ethan's voice, close. Stop thinking about what you can't move. Think about what you can. She focused. Her hands. She could feel her hands. She unclenched them and let her fingers extend, slowly, like something unfurling after a long winter. She moved her right hand first, lifted it from the armrest and let it float in the air beside her. Then her left. Both hands rising, drifting, finding the music the way roots find water. Her shoulders followed, a slow roll, left then right. Her head tilted back. She could feel the stretch in her neck, the pull of muscles she'd been clenching for 3 years. And then something happened that she hadn't expected. She felt the music. Not heard it, felt it. In her chest, in her ribs, in the part of her spine that still worked, the part above the break, the part that connected her brain to her heart, and her heart to her hands. The music moved through that connection like electricity, and her body answered. She didn't know what she looked like. She didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, Clare Ashford was moving not to get somewhere, not to prove something, not to transfer from one seat to another, or reach a file on a high shelf, or demonstrate to a boardroom full of doubters that she was still capable. She was moving because it felt good, because her body wanted to, because the music asked and her body said yes. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was watching her. Not with pity, not with a clinical assessment of a therapist, with something that looked a lot like recognition, like he was seeing something in her that he'd seen in himself once. The moment when grief cracks open just enough to let something else in. There you go, he said softly. The class went on for an hour. Ethan moved through the room, working with each person individually, adjusting their movements, suggesting new ones, laughing with them, telling terrible jokes that made Lily groan from her post at the pancake table. He spent 10 minutes with the teenage boy. Marcus, his name was, helping him develop a routine that used his shoulders and torso as the primary instruments of expression. He worked with a woman in the electric wheelchair, Rosa, on a spinning technique that turned her chair into a partner rather than a cage. And he came back to Clare 3 times. The first time, he stood behind her chair and placed his hands lightly on her shoulders. "Can I?" he asked. "Yes." He began to move her chair, not pushing it across the floor the way he had at the gala, but rocking it gently, side to side, in rhythm with the music. Her body swayed with it. She felt her spine curve and straighten, and the motion was so simple, so fundamental, that it brought tears to her eyes. "That's called grounding," Ethan said. "Your body remembers how to move. It just needs permission." The second time, he brought Lily over. "Lily's going to be your partner for this next one."
"I'm a very good partner," Lily announced. "I only step on people's feet sometimes." Clare took Lily's hands. They were small and sticky, pancake residue, and warm. Lily began to move, swinging their connected hands side to side, and Clare followed. The movement was silly, playful, the kind of thing Clare hadn't done since she was a child herself, long before the boardrooms and the balance sheets and the broken spine. Lily started spinning, pulling Clare's hands, and Clare's chair turned with her. A slow orbit, daughter and stranger, child and CEO, linked by sticky fingers and a shared rhythm. "You're good at this," Lily said. "I'm following your lead," Clare said. "I know. That's why you're good at it. Dad says the best dancers are the ones who know when to follow." Clare looked at Ethan over Lily's head. He was watching them with an expression she couldn't decode. Something between joy and grief. Something that lived in the space where his wife used to be. The third time he came to her, the class was almost over. The music had slowed to something quiet. People were cooling down, stretching, talking softly. Lily was sharing the last of the pancakes with Marcus, who was eating them by leaning down and biting directly from the plate while Lily held it, both of them laughing. Ethan knelt beside Clare's chair. "How are you doing?" "I don't know how to answer that." "Try." She looked at her hands. They were resting in her lap, palms up, open. She didn't remember opening them. "I feel like I've been holding something very heavy for a very long time," she said. "And someone just told me I could put it down." Ethan nodded. "That's what this is. Not therapy, not rehab, just permission. To take up space, to move, to be in your body without fighting it. Your wife taught you that." "She taught me everything." "Tell me about her." He sat back on his heels. Sarah Mercer, born in Milwaukee, danced before she walked. Her mother swore she came out of the womb doing a pirouette. She trained at Joffrey, danced professionally for 8 years, blew out her knee at 29, and everyone told her it was over. She started teaching the next day, opened a studio, filled it with kids who couldn't afford lessons anywhere else, married a guy who couldn't dance to save his life. You. Me. She spent 6 years trying to teach me rhythm. I spent 6 years stepping on her feet. He smiled, but his eyes were wet. She got sick when Lily was 6. Pancreatic cancer. Fast. Brutal. She danced through chemo. She danced through radiation. She danced until she couldn't stand, and then she danced sitting down. The last time she danced was 3 weeks before she died. Lily was there. I was there. She held both our hands and she said, "This is what it's all about.
Not the steps, not the technique. Just this. Being here. Moving. Together. Claire's throat was so tight she couldn't speak.
She died on a Tuesday, Ethan said. Lily was at school. I was holding her hand. The last thing she said to me was, "Don't you dare stop moving, Ethan Mercer. Don't you dare." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a quick, rough gesture. The kind of gesture men make when they're trying to hold something together that wants to fall apart. "So I didn't stop," he said. "I lost the house. I lost the career. I lost everything that looked like my old life. But I didn't stop moving. I started this class because Sarah would have started it. I teach it because she taught me. And every Saturday, when these people come through that door, and they close their eyes, and they find the music, that's Sarah. That's her, still here, still dancing." Claire reached out and took his hand. She didn't think about it. She just did it. Her fingers closed around his, and she held on. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me that. Thank you for listening." "Ethan."
"Yeah? I have to present to the board on Monday. A growth plan. It's going to determine whether I keep my company or lose it."
"I know. I spent until 3 a.m. working on the numbers. They're good. They're really good. But numbers aren't going to be enough. Victor doesn't fight with numbers. He fights with fear. He makes people afraid, and then he tells them he's the only one who can protect them. Sounds like a bully. He is a bully. A very sophisticated, very powerful bully. And I've been fighting him with spreadsheets and data and logic for 3 years, and it's not working. Because you can't beat fear with logic. You can only beat fear with something stronger." "What's stronger than fear?" "I don't know. That's why I came here today. Because I thought you might." Ethan looked at her for a long time. The music had stopped. The room was emptying. Rosa waved goodbye from her electric wheelchair. Marcus called out, "Same time next week," as he headed for the door. Lily was stacking paper plates with the focus of a surgeon. "When Sarah was dying," Ethan said slowly, "she wasn't afraid. I was terrified. Lily was terrified. But Sarah was calm. I asked her how. How could she be calm when everything was ending? And she said, 'I'm not calm, Ethan. I'm present.' There's a difference. Calm means you've stopped feeling. Present means you feel everything, and you stay anyway." He squeezed Claire's hand. "You don't need to beat Victor with something stronger than fear. You need to show that board who you are when you're not afraid. Not the CEO who fights from a defensive position. Not the woman who spent 3 years proving she's still capable. The woman I saw on that dance floor. The woman who closed her eyes in front of 400 people and let herself feel something. That's who they need to see on Monday." Claire stared at him. "You're asking me to be vulnerable in a boardroom.
Do you have any idea how dangerous that is?
I'm asking you to be real. You said Victor fights with fear. So stop playing his game. Stop fighting fear with armor. Take the armor off and let them see what's underneath." "What's underneath is a woman who's terrified of losing everything she's built." "Exactly. And that woman, the real one, the terrified one who still shows up, that's the leader they need. Not the one who pretends nothing hurts. The one who hurts and fights anyway." Claire pulled her hand back. Not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid of how much she didn't want to. This man, this bartender, this widowed father, this teacher of dance in a community center on the South Side. He was reaching into parts of her that no one had touched since the accident. Parts she'd walled off. Parts she'd buried under quarterly reports and board strategies and the relentless forward motion of a life lived in defiance of its own brokenness. "I need to go,"
she said.
I have to finish the proposal. I know. Saturday, same time next week? Same time every week, for as long as you need. She rolled toward the door. Lily came running up behind her. Claire, wait! Claire turned. Lily was holding a paper plate with 2 pancakes on it, wrapped in a napkin. For later, Lily said, in case you get hungry while you're being the boss. Claire took the plate. She looked down at this 9-year-old girl who had lost her mother and made pancakes for strangers and danced with a woman in a wheelchair like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lily, Claire said, can I tell you something? Okay. You are exactly like your dad. Lily's face broke into a grin so wide it seemed to contain the whole room. That's what Mom used to say. Claire's vision blurred. She blinked hard and nodded, and rolled through the door before the tears could fall. The car was waiting. The driver helped her in. The chair folded into the trunk.
As the car pulled away from the curb, Claire looked back through the rear window.
Ethan was standing in the doorway of the community center with Lily beside him. Lily waved with both hands. Ethan raised one hand, steady and still. Claire pressed her palm to the glass. The car turned the corner and they disappeared. She pulled out her phone and opened the proposal document. The numbers were all there. The projections, the market analysis, the 3-year growth timeline. It was thorough. It was professional. It was everything the board expected from a CEO defending her position. But Ethan was right. It wasn't enough. She opened a new document and started typing. Not numbers this time. Words. The words she would say on Monday when she sat, before the board and fought for her life. She typed for the entire ride home. She typed through lunch. She typed through the afternoon and into the evening.
At 8 o'clock, she sent the revised proposal to Langley and Diane with a note. New section at the end. Don't cut it. Trust me. Langley called 10 minutes later. Claire, this last section. It's personal. Very personal. Are you sure? I'm sure. Victor will use it against you. Let him try. Claire. James, I've spent 3 years fighting Victor Hale with the same weapons he uses. Data, strategy, political maneuvering. And he's still winning. Because he's better at that game than I am. He's been playing it longer. He has more allies. He fights dirtier. So I'm done playing his game. What game are you playing? Mine. Langley was quiet for a moment. All right, I trust you. But if this goes sideways, then it goes sideways. And I'll deal with it the same way I've dealt with everything else. From this chair. She hung up. She sat in the dark of her apartment, the city shimmering below her, the lake stretching out to the horizon like a promise. She picked up the pancakes Lily had given her. They were cold now, the chocolate chips hardened into small, dark pebbles. She ate them anyway. They were a little burned on the bottom. Lily was right. It added character. Claire smiled in the dark and set the empty plate on the table beside her phone. She looked at Ethan's last message from that morning. Lily wants to know if you like chocolate chip or blueberry pancakes, and typed a reply. Tell Lily the pancakes were perfect, and tell her I said thank you, for all of it. The reply came a minute later. She says you're welcome, and she wants to know if you'll come back next Saturday. I'll be there. Good, because she's already planning waffles. Claire laughed softly. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was Sunday. She'd spend it reviewing the final proposal, rehearsing her presentation, and preparing for the fight of her life. Monday would come fast. Victor would come faster. But tonight, right now, in this quiet moment between the battle that was and the battle to come,
Clare Ashford sat in the dark with a taste of burned chocolate chip pancakes on her tongue, and the memory of a child's sticky hands in hers, and the echo of a dead woman's words in her heart. "Don't you dare stop moving." She wouldn't. She pressed her hands to the wheels of her chair and rolled herself to the bedroom. She transferred to the bed, the movement practiced, precise, the nightly negotiation between her body and the world it no longer fully inhabited. She pulled the covers up and stared at the ceiling. Monday was coming, and when it came, Clare Ashford was going to walk into that boardroom, roll into that boardroom, and do something she had never done in her entire career. She was going to tell the truth. Not the truth of numbers and projections and market analyses. Not the strategic truth that executives trade like currency. The real truth.
The one that lived underneath the spreadsheets and the power suits and the unbreakable facade she'd spent 3 years constructing. The truth about who she was. The truth about what the wheelchair had taken from her and what it hadn't. The truth about what it means to lead, really lead, not from a position of strength, but from a position of honesty. She was terrified. She fell asleep with her hand on her chest, feeling her own heartbeat, counting each one like a promise. Still here, still fighting, still dancing. Monday would come, and she would be ready. Monday morning arrived like a verdict. Clare was awake before the alarm. She'd slept 3 hours, maybe 4, and her body felt it. The dull ache in her shoulders and the tightness behind her eyes that came from too many nights of too little rest. But her mind was sharp. Her mind was a blade. She transferred to her wheelchair, rolled to the bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was not the woman who had sat frozen at the center table of the Meridian Grand Ballroom 5 days ago. That woman had been holding on. This woman was letting go. She put on the navy suit, the one with the sharp shoulders. She fastened the single pearl earring her father had given her on her 21st birthday, the only piece of jewelry she wore to board meetings. She didn't wear it for luck. She wore it because Edward Ashford had handed it to her and said, "You don't need 2. 1 is enough. 1 is strong, like you." Diane was waiting in the lobby at 7:30. She took one look at Clare and said, "You're ready." "I'm terrified." "Same thing." They rode to the office in silence. Claire's phone sat on the seat beside her, and she didn't touch it. She didn't check email. She didn't review the proposal one more time. She knew it by heart. Every number, every projection, every word of the new section she'd added Saturday night. The section Langley had called personal. The section that would either save her or destroy her. At 8:15, they arrived at Ashford Capitol. The building rose above them, 42 floors of glass and steel. The name Ashford in brushed silver letters above the entrance. Clare had walked through that entrance 1,000 times before the accident. Walked, ran, strode with the confidence of a woman who owned the ground beneath her feet. Now she rolled through it, and every time she felt the difference. Not in her legs, in the way people looked at her. The slight downward adjustment of their eyes. The half-second pause before they spoke. The careful, constant recalibration of a world that didn't know what to do with a powerful woman who couldn't stand up. Today she didn't care about any of that. Today she cared about one thing: the truth. At 9 o'clock, Langley called. "Reynolds confirmed. He'll be there at 2. All 9 members present." "And Victor?" "Arrived at 7. He's been in the building for 2 hours. He's meeting with Davidson privately." "Let him. Davidson's already his. Let Victor waste his morning shoring up votes he's already got." "Clare, one more thing.
I got a call from Eleanor Reynolds last night.
Reynolds' wife?
She saw the video.
Claire's stomach tightened. What video?
Someone at the gala recorded Victor's speech and the dance. It's online. It went up yesterday afternoon.
How many views?
As of this morning, 2 million.
Claire closed her eyes. She hadn't expected that. She'd been so focused on the boardroom battle that she'd forgotten about the rest of the world beyond the mahogany table and the 9 votes that would decide her future.
What did Eleanor say? Claire asked. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, she said she showed it to James last night, and he watched it 3 times. She said he didn't say anything after. He just sat in his study for an hour.
Then he came out and told her he'd made his decision.
Which way?
She didn't say. But she called me, Claire, not Victor's people. Me. Claire let that register. It didn't mean victory. It didn't mean anything yet. But it meant that the dance, that terrifying, beautiful, unplanned moment on the gala floor, had traveled further than the ballroom. It had reached into James Reynolds' home and made him sit in silence for an hour. That was something.
Thank you, James, she said.
Don't thank me yet. Thank me at 3 o'clock when this is over. She hung up and turned to her laptop. The proposal was ready. 38 pages. Executive summary. Market analysis. 3-year projections. The international expansion plan. The sustainable investment fund. And at the end, pages 35 through 38. The section she'd written Saturday night with burned pancakes beside her and a dead woman's words in her head. She read it one more time.
Then she closed the laptop and called her mother. Margaret answered on the second ring.
Tell me you're ready.
I'm ready.
Tell me you're going to win.
I'm going to tell the truth. That's all I can promise. Margaret was quiet for a moment.
Your father used to say that the truth is the only strategy that never expires.
I know. You told me.
I'm telling you again, because today it matters.
Margaret's voice softened. A rare thing. A precious thing.
Claire, whatever happens in that room today, I want you to know something.
What?
The night of the gala, when that man asked you to dance, I watched you say yes. And in that moment, I saw your father. Not his face, his courage. The kind of courage that comes from deciding that who you are matters more than what anyone thinks of you. He had that. You have that. And no board vote can take it away.
Claire's eyes burned. She pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose.
Thank you, Mother. Go fight. I'll be here.
Claire ended the call and sat still for a long time. The office hummed around her. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the quiet machinery of a company she'd built and rebuilt and bled for. She thought about every person in the building. The analysts on the 4th floor, who stayed late because they believed in the work. The HR team on 7, who'd redesigned the entire office to accommodate her wheelchair without her having to ask. The young woman in the mailroom, Keisha, who stopped Claire every morning to tell her about the business degree she was finishing at night school, because Claire had offered to pay for it. This wasn't just a company. It was a living thing, a community. And Victor Hale wanted to strip it down to numbers on a spreadsheet and sell off everything that made it matter. Not today. At 1:45, Claire rolled toward the boardroom. Diane walked beside her, carrying the printed proposals in a leather folder. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. 3 years of shared silence had built a language between them that words couldn't improve. At the boardroom door, Claire stopped.
Diane. Yes?
Whatever happens in there, you've been the best thing about these 3 years. I want you to know that. Diane's composure cracked. Just a fraction. Just a tremor in her lower lip. She straightened it immediately. "You're going to make me ruin my mascara, and I'm not forgiving you for that." Claire smiled. "Stay close." "Always." Claire pushed through the door. They were all there, 9 board members seated around the table, the same configuration as Saturday, the same charged air, but heavier now. This was it. No more delays, no more procedural maneuvers. This was the moment. Victor sat at the far end, his posture relaxed, his expression composed. He'd spent the weekend preparing too. Claire could see it in the thickness of the folder in front of him, the careful arrangement of his materials. He was ready for a fight. He was ready for the Clare Ashford he knew. The defensive CEO, armed with data and corporate jargon, and the controlled fury of a woman who refused to show weakness. He wasn't ready for what she was about to do. "Thank you all for being here," Claire said, rolling to the head of the table. "I know this weekend has been difficult. I know many of you have been contacted by various parties with various agendas. I appreciate your time and your patience." She opened the leather folder and distributed the printed proposals. 9 copies, 38 pages each. She watched them land in front of each board member with the quiet weight of something that had cost her everything to create. In front of you is Ashford Capital's 3-year growth plan. Pages 1 through 34 contain the quantitative analysis, international expansion into 3 target markets, the launch of a sustainable investment fund, and a restructuring of our fee model to attract next-generation wealth. The numbers are strong. James Langley has reviewed them independently and can speak to their validity. Langley nodded. The projections are conservative and defensible. 12 to 15% growth over 3 years, with manageable risk exposure. "I encourage you to review the data thoroughly," Claire continued, "but I want to direct your attention to the final section, pages 35 through 38. Papers rustled. 9 board members turned to page 35. Victor looked down at the page, his brow furrowed. "This section is not about numbers," Claire said. "It's about something I've never shared with this board, something I've been too afraid to share. And I've decided that fear is no longer a good enough reason to stay silent." The room went very still. Claire took a breath. She didn't look at her notes. She didn't need them. The words were part of her now, written from the same place that had said yes on a dance floor, and "I feel alive" on a phone call to a stranger. 3 years ago, she said, I was driving home from this office at 11 o'clock at night. I'd stayed late to finish a presentation for this board. It was raining. A delivery truck ran a red light on Michigan Avenue and hit my car on the driver's side. I don't remember the impact. I remember waking up in a hospital bed and being told that I would never walk again. She paused, not for effect, because her throat had closed, and she needed a moment to open it again. For the first 6 months, I was angry. Angry at the truck driver, angry at the rain, angry at God, at the universe, at every pair of legs I saw walking past my hospital window. I was so angry that I couldn't see anything else. I couldn't see my mother sitting beside my bed every night. I couldn't see my team sending flowers every week. I couldn't see anything except what I'd lost. Then I came back to work. 4 months after the accident, I rolled into this building and I sat at this table, and I dared anyone to feel sorry for me. And no one did, at least not to my face. But I could feel it, the pity, the doubt, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I could feel this company recalibrating around my disability, the same way the world does, carefully, awkwardly, with the best of intentions and the worst of assumptions. Victor shifted in his chair. His expression was unreadable. So I did what I've always done, Claire said. I worked harder. I worked longer. I made myself indispensable. I delivered the best quarterly numbers this company had seen in a decade. And I did it from this chair. And every time someone questioned whether I could lead, every time someone suggested, directly or indirectly, that my wheelchair made me less, I responded with data, with results, with the cold, hard proof that I was still the best person for this job. She looked around the table. Peterson's eyes were red. Cho was staring at his hands. Reynolds was watching her with an intensity that bordered on pain. "But here's what I never told you," Clare said. "Here's what I was too proud and too scared to admit." She swallowed. "I was drowning. Not professionally. Professionally, I was performing. But personally, I was dying. I hadn't laughed in 3 years. I hadn't been touched with kindness by another human being in 3 years. I went home to an empty apartment every night and sat by the window and wondered if this was it. If the rest of my life would be an endless series of board meetings and quarterly reports and proving, over and over, to people who would never be satisfied, that I deserved to be here." Her voice cracked. She let it. "Last Thursday night, at our charity gala, the chairman of this board stood on a stage and told 400 people that I cannot lead this company because I can't stand on my own 2 feet. She looked at Victor. He held her gaze, but something behind his eyes was shifting. The first crack in a wall he'd spent years building. "And he was wrong," Clare said. "Not because his words didn't hurt. They did. They hurt more than any quarterly dip or shareholder complaint or hostile motion. They hurt because they took the thing I'm most afraid of, the thing I fight every single day, and they put it on display for the world to see." But then something happened that I didn't expect. A man I'd never met, a bartender working the event, walked across that dance floor and asked me to dance. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know about Ashford Capital, or the board, or the stock price. He just saw a woman who looked like she needed someone to see her. And he did. She paused again. The room was so quiet she could hear the blood in her own ears. I danced that night, for the first time in 3 years, and it didn't fix me. It didn't heal my spine, or make the wheelchair disappear, or solve any of the business problems we're here to discuss today. But it reminded me of something I had forgotten. It reminded me that I am not just a CEO. I am not just a set of quarterly results. I am not just a woman in a wheelchair trying to prove she still matters. I am a human being. And human beings need more than data and strategy and defensive posturing. They need connection. They need joy. They need to be seen for who they actually are, not who the world expects them to be. She leaned forward. That is what I want to bring to this company. Not just growth, though the growth plan in front of you will deliver that. Not just stability, though our client retention rate proves we already have that. I want to bring the thing that makes Ashford Capital different from every other firm on Wall Street. The thing my father built this company on. The thing our foundation represents. The thing Victor wants to sell off because he can't put a dollar value on it. Heart. The word landed like a stone in still water. This company has a heart, Clare said. It has always had a heart. It's in the foundation my mother built. It's in the community programs we fund. It's in the way we treat our employees and our clients and the cities where we operate. And I'm telling you right now, if you take me out of this chair and put someone else in my place, and if that someone dismantles what we've built in the name of shareholder value, you will gain 15% in the short term, and you will lose everything that makes this company worth leading in the long term. She straightened. So here's what I'm asking. I'm not asking you to keep me because you feel sorry for me. I'm not asking you to keep me because my last name is on the building. I'm asking you to keep me because I am the right leader for this company. Because I know what it's like to lose everything and rebuild. Because I know what it's like to be underestimated and prove people wrong. Because I've sat in this chair, both of these chairs, through the worst 3 years of my life, and I have not once stopped fighting for the people in this building and the clients who trust us with their futures." She looked at Victor one last time. "And I'm asking you to consider what kind of company you want Ashford Capital to be. One that's led by fear, or one that's led by someone who knows what it means to be afraid and shows up anyway?" She sat back. She was done. The silence lasted 11 seconds. Claire counted every one. Then Reynolds spoke. "I'd like to call the vote." Victor's head snapped toward him. "The vote was scheduled for discussion only today."
"The 48-hour period has been satisfied," Peterson said. "The motion was filed Saturday morning. It's now Monday afternoon. 48 hours have passed. We can vote." Victor's jaw clenched. He looked around the table, at Davidson, at Cho, at Whitmore. His allies, his votes, the men he'd spent months cultivating, weeks coaching, days preparing for this exact moment. "Fine," Victor said. "Let's vote." Peterson called the roll. On the motion of no confidence in CEO Clare Ashford, all in favor of the motion, that is, all in favor of removing Clare as CEO, say aye. "Aye," Davidson said. "Aye," Victor said. Silence. Peterson looked at Cho. Cho looked at his hands. 5 seconds passed. 10. "Nay," Cho said quietly. Victor turned to him with an expression that could have cut glass. "Howard." "I said nay, Victor." Peterson continued. "Whitmore?" "Nay." "Reynolds?" Reynolds took off his glasses. He cleaned them with his tie. That same gesture, deliberate and slow. He put them back on and looked directly at Claire. "Nay." "Peterson votes nay. Langley votes nay. Morrison?" "Nay." "Graham?" "Nay." Peterson set down his pen. "The motion fails, 7-2. Clare Ashford remains CEO of Ashford Capital." Claire didn't move. She sat at the head of the table with her hands in her lap and her heart hammering, and the tears she'd been holding back for 30 minutes, finally threatening to break through. She held them. Not because she was too proud to cry, but because she wanted to remember this moment exactly as it was. Clear, sharp, real. Victor stood. He buttoned his jacket. The motion was mechanical, habitual, the gesture of a man who had already begun calculating his next move. But something was different in his posture. Something was smaller. "This isn't over," he said to Claire. "I know," she said. "But today it is." He walked out. Davidson followed. The door closed behind them with a sound that felt like a period at the end of a sentence. The room exhaled. Cho approached Claire before anyone else. He stood in front of her wheelchair and did something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. He extended his hand. "I should have done this a long time ago," he said. Claire shook his hand. "You did it when it mattered." Cho nodded and left. Reynolds came next. He didn't shake her hand. He didn't say anything about the vote or the proposal or the numbers. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "My son wants to talk to you," he said. "His name is Daniel. He's been in a wheelchair since he was 4. He watched the video from the gala this morning and he called me crying. He said he'd never seen anyone like you." Claire took the phone. Her hand was trembling. "Daniel? Ms. Ashford?" The voice on the other end was young, clear, shaking with emotion. "I just wanted to say thank you for dancing." "For all of it. You don't know what it means to see someone like me in a room like that, doing what you did."
Claire pressed the phone to her ear and closed her eyes.
Daniel, it means everything. And I promise you, this is just the beginning. She handed the phone back to Reynolds. He looked at her with wet eyes, nodded once, and walked out. Peterson and Langley were the last to leave. Peterson squeezed her shoulder. The same gesture every time, a fatherly weight that anchored her to something solid. Langley stopped at the door. "The Sustainable Fund," he said. "How fast can we launch it?" 90 days. "Make it 60. I'll help." He left. Claire sat alone in the boardroom, the same boardroom where, 5 days ago, she'd prepared for a fight she wasn't sure she could win. The same table, the same chairs, the same windows looking out over a city that had broken her and built her and was about to see what she could really do. She pulled out her phone and called Ethan.
He answered on the first ring. "How'd it go?"
7-2.
"You won?"
"I won." She heard him exhale, a long, shaking breath, the kind that comes from holding something too tightly for too long.
"Claire, I did what you said. I took the armor off.
And
And it was the hardest thing I've ever done, including the accident, including the rehab, including every single day in this chair. Standing in front of those people and being honest about what the last 3 years have been like, that was harder than all of it.
But you did it.
I did it.
God, I'm proud of you." She laughed. It came out wet and ragged and real.
You're proud of me? You've known me 5 days.
Some people you know in 5 minutes. It just takes 5 days to say it. She pressed the phone against her ear and breathed him in. His voice, his steadiness, the warmth that radiated through a phone line like it was nothing. Like kindness was the easiest thing in the world.
Ethan.
"Yeah? I want to start a foundation. An adaptive arts foundation. Dance, music, theater, for people with disabilities. Real programs, not charity galas. Real spaces, like your community center. Funded properly, staffed properly, built to last." That's a big idea. I'm a big idea person. It's what got me into this chair. The working late part, not the big idea part. He laughed. "When do you want to start?" "I already started. I put it in the proposal. Page 37. The board just approved it." "You... what?" "I built it into the growth plan, an adaptive arts foundation under the Ashford Capital philanthropic umbrella. First location, Chicago South Side. And I need a director." The line went quiet. She could hear Lily in the background. Always Lily, that constant bright note in the music of Ethan's life, singing something about pancakes. "Claire," he said, and his voice was rough. "I'm a bartender. You're a teacher. You're a healer. You're the man who walked across a dance floor and changed my life. And you're the man whose wife said that dance isn't about your legs, it's about your intention. I want that. I want that for every person who's been told their body makes them less. Will you help me build it?" He didn't answer right away. She heard him breathe. She heard Lily stop singing and say, "Dad? Who's on the phone? Is it Claire? Tell her I'm making waffles next Saturday." "It's Claire," Ethan said, his voice thick. "And she wants us to build something, Lily." "Build what?" "Something your mom would have loved." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Say yes, Dad." Ethan laughed. It was the most beautiful sound Claire had ever heard, broken and whole at the same time. Like music played on an instrument that had been repaired so many times it had become something new. "Yes," he said. "Yes." 6 months later, the Ashford Adaptive Arts Foundation held its grand opening. It was nothing like the gala. No chandeliers, no champagne, no tuxedos or evening gowns or tables draped in white linen. It was held in a renovated warehouse on the south side of Chicago that still smelled like fresh paint and new wood. 300 people came. People in wheelchairs and on crutches, and with prosthetic limbs, and with conditions the world had told them made them less. They came with their families. They came with their friends. They came because they'd seen a video of a woman dancing in a wheelchair and a bartender who'd been brave enough to ask. Margaret Ashford was there, standing in the corner in a silver dress, because Margaret always wore silver, watching her daughter with an expression that held 22 years of worry and 30 seconds of absolute peace. Langley was there, already talking to potential donors. Peterson was there, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief and pretending it was allergies. Reynolds was there with Eleanor and a young man in an electric wheelchair who couldn't stop smiling. Even Cho came. He stood awkwardly near the refreshment table, looking out of place and entirely where he belonged. And in the center of the room, under lights that Lily had helped hang, "They need to be lower, Dad, so everyone can see them, not just the tall people." Ethan Mercer stood with a microphone. "I'm not a speech guy," he said, "so I'm going to keep this short. My wife Sarah used to say that dance is the only language everyone speaks. You don't need legs to speak it. You don't need arms. You don't need eyes or ears or a body that works the way the world says it should. You just need intention. You just need to decide that you're going to take up space in this world, and that the space you take up matters." He looked at Claire. 6 months ago, a woman I'd never met was sitting alone at a table while the whole world told her she didn't belong, and I did the only thing I know how to do. I asked her to dance. He paused. She said yes, and everything changed. Not because of me, because of her. Because she had the courage to say yes when every part of her wanted to say no. Because she decided that her life was worth more than survival. Because she believed, even when no one else did, that a woman in a wheelchair could still lead a company and build a foundation and change the world. He raised his hand toward her. "Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of the Ashford Adaptive Arts Foundation, Clare Ashford." The room erupted. 300 people clapping, cheering, some of them crying. Claire rolled forward through the crowd, and people reached out to touch her hands, her shoulders, her chair. Not with pity, but with recognition, with belonging, with the unspoken understanding of people who know what it means to fight for their place in the world. She reached Ethan. Lily was beside him, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself. Purple, because purple is the color of being awesome, and holding a plate of waffles. "I told you I'd make waffles," Lily said. Claire took one. "Are they burned on the bottom?" "Obviously." "Good. It adds character." Lily grinned and threw her arms around Claire's neck. Claire held her, this child who had lost her mother and found a way to fill the world with sweetness anyway, and felt something settle in her chest. Something permanent. Something that had been looking for a home for 3 years and had finally found one. Ethan extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Claire looked at him. This man who had seen her when no one else would. This man who had walked across a dance floor into a fire because he knew what it meant to burn and survive. "You may," she said. The music started. Something simple. A guitar, a piano. The same kind of music that had played in the Bridgeport Community Center on a Saturday morning that felt like a lifetime ago. Ethan moved behind her chair and began to push her, slowly, gently, in wide circles across the warehouse floor.
Lily ran alongside them, spinning with her arms out, her purple dress flaring. Rosa was there, turning her electric wheelchair in the slow spirals Ethan had taught her. Marcus moved his shoulders and torso to the rhythm, his face lit up with joy. 300 people, moving, together, whole. Claire closed her eyes. She felt the music in her chest, in her hands, in the part of her that had survived every surgery and every boardroom and every night alone by the window. The part that had said yes when a stranger asked her to dance. The part that had sat, before a hostile board and told the truth. The part that had decided, finally, irrevocably, that being alive was not the same as surviving. She opened her eyes and looked at the room,
At the people she'd helped bring together, at the foundation that bore her family's name, at the man pushing her chair and the child dancing beside them, and the mother watching from the corner, and the future stretching out before her like a dance floor, vast, open, hers. She was Clare Ashford, CEO, founder, daughter, friend. A woman in a wheelchair who had been told she couldn't stand and had decided to dance instead. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. Because the truth Clare Ashford had learned, the truth Ethan Mercer had shown her with a pair of cracked shoes and an outstretched hand, and the memory of a wife who danced until she couldn't stand, was simple. You don't need to stand to lead. You don't need to walk to move. You don't need permission to take up space in this world. You just need to say yes. And Clare Ashford, surrounded by music and light and the people she loved, said yes one more time. Not to a dance, not to a question, to her life. All of it. The pain and the joy and the fear and the hope and the beautiful, unfinished, unbreakable wholeness of being exactly who she was. She said yes, and she kept dancing.